Strong deliverer, be thou still my strength and shield. Be thou still my strength and
You may be seated. Good morning and happy Sabbath, ASI, and guests and friends, family. We are so happy to be here this morning to talk with you and share a little bit more about the projects that we are going to be funding in this morning's offering. With me is Tony Moore, and he's with Biblical World. Tell me what your role is, and what is Biblical World? And you're dressed interestingly. How does that relate to Biblical World?
Well, I thought nobody would recognize me without this shirt, right? You recognize the shirt? And so the Biblical World is a really special ministry where we get to go on location and teach about Paul and about Jesus. And people often wonder, are you really that poor you can only afford one shirt? And but actually, we have about 8 or 9 other shirts, but it helps us in our wardrobe counting. So the Biblical World is really a special ministry that takes you on location to explore the world of the Bible. And we have a fascinating series on the life of Paul and the life of Jesus. It's really exciting.
How did Biblical World get started?
Well, you know, I was a pastor for 25 years, and I was fascinated by the ancient world and the setting for the Bible. And I actually had a group of pastors on tour. Now, before that, I actually had a series on archaeology I would do, and we'd draw a large crowd out evangelistically. And I took a group of pastors from Southern California on tour, and one of them was my youth pastor. And he was filming me, and he said, "You don't have to use slides about this. We can make movies." And I thought, that's why you're the youth pastor and I'm the senior pastor, because you're very naive. We can't make movies. We don't have a budget for that. But we came back and he made a little 2-minute demo, and there was Indiana Jones music playing, and there was a map and a plane, and boom, I was teaching in Tarsus, and I thought, we can make movies of this. And that's really the way the footsteps of Paul developed. And now it's really enjoyed around the world.
So now there's the Jesus series. How did that come about?
Well, let me tell you first about this, because there's a part that you don't see on television, and that's the study guides. And this is what transforms it from just something enjoyable to see on 3ABN or Hope Channel or Safe TV into something really engaging, because you can use this evangelistically in small groups. There's beautiful lessons that go with each episode, and there's Bible studies, and it's really wonderful. People use it really around the world, publicly for public meetings or follow-up to evangelistic meetings or pre-meetings or even as an evangelistic meeting, and wonderful in small groups. I really had a dream when I was a pastor and I started this, that maybe doctors could invite their patients to come and have a small group in their home. Because they got credibility, right? Yeah, or dentists or business people, or anyone could do that, and it's really special.
Tony, I remember you were sharing with me some of the experiences you've had on airplanes. You've got to share that with everyone.
Well, you know, when I was I left, we had done the filming, and I went to It Is Written, and I would be flying, and I was flying up to Montreal. I'll never forget, there was an empty seat, and there's a computer programmer from San Francisco going to the Montreal Jazz Festival. Well, not a target for a Bible study necessarily, but there was an empty seat, and I was working on my series. He asked what I did, and he said, "I'm not very spiritual," and I thought, that didn't surprise me. And he's watching. I said, "You want to see an episode?" He watches 2 episodes, and he says, how can I get this? This is fascinating. I was flying one night from L.A. to Boston, and there was an empty seat, and there was a young bohemian-dressed woman, and I thought, she's not a spiritual lady. I'll get a lot of work done on this flight, you know. And she asked what I did, and I told her, I make biblical movies. And she says, I'm not very religious. And I thought, didn't surprise me. What do you do? She said, I work for Cal State University. I'm flying back to Harvard to make a presentation, but I don't like the East Coast, so I'll be back in Pasadena tomorrow night. I said, cool, and I'm just working. She said, what's that? And I said, oh, this is what I tell you about it. We make these biblical movies. You want to see an episode? And she watches one. She says, wow, this is fascinating. I took the Bible from a feminist perspective in university, but this is a whole different aspect of it. The plane had to make an emergency landing in Las Vegas to change equipment. She said, I'm out of here. I'm not going to get to Boston at 2 in the morning. So I went over and I sat down by a gentleman. He had his iPod plugged in, and he asked what I did. And he said, I'm not a religious person. I said, okay, what do you do? And he said, I'm a MD, PhD, and the Chief Medical Officer of the Red Cross in New England. I've been in San Diego speaking on the blood supply, and now I'm going back to Boston. And he keeps looking at my screen. I said, you want to see an episode? And he said, well, yeah. And so he watches one and says, wow, this is fascinating. How can I get this to share with my wife? Happens almost every time on an airplane with people. And I knew I was tapping into a vein of interest in the ancient world. And that's really what we try and do. Is many of you have seen this on the various networks. We really try and look at culture and history and give that as a setting for the biblical story.
Now, some small groups and public meetings, how would you use this in that setting?
Well, it's wonderful in small groups because you just basically invite the people to come in. In the Paul series, you would give them the magazine, you watch the episode, and then it's interactive. There are questions and answers, and everything that's in the printed study guide comes up on the DVD. And they can actually fill it out, and then there are application questions that apply to everyday life, and a Bible study that they can do to track along thematically with that. And you ask about the Jesus series, yes. And let me just kind of tell you about the Jesus series. We just released this in January. Some of you might have seen it on Hope Channel, and it's being used literally around the world. As a matter of fact, I just used this in Southport, England. As a matter of fact, a week ago, well, now it's Sabbath, so it'd be 2 weeks ago tonight, we had our last meeting in Southport, and it was wonderful, a special program that we were doing there, and a phenomenal response. It was actually, the North England Conference asked me to come and do something to try and reach the indigenous people of England.
Okay, so explain that.